Good morning. Why don't we get started? This is the press conference I have before legislative meetings. Don't always have one before an additional legislative meeting. Tomorrow we will have an additional legislative meeting. But we're having this press conference anyway because there are a few issues that I figure folks either want to ask about or I should cover. With regard to tomorrow, we will have a committee of the whole meeting, an additional meeting. Additional is our word for special or not a regularly scheduled meeting. There'll be a committee of the whole meeting. The committee of the whole is marking up three measures. Probably the most significant of them is, excuse me, these are Seizure Safe Schools Amendment Act. It just simply requires that schools have to have a plan to deal with how to react to respond to if a child has a seizure, such as an epileptic seizure in the school. There are a number of nomination confirmations that are coming through the different committees and a few bills. We are getting busier as we get closer to the end of the year, which is also the end of council period 25. So the committee of the whole will meet at 11. There is not a breakfast for council members before then. However, there is an administrative meeting. And at the moment, I'm not remembering what we're discussing at that meeting. The secretary should be putting out a notice of the meeting for tomorrow. So that's, I'll call it an administrative meeting, but not a breakfast before the committee of the whole at 11, which will be before the legislative meeting, which will be at noon or immediately following the committee of the whole. With regard to the committee of the whole meeting, probably the most interesting measures on the committee of the whole agenda are the emergency bills as well as the veto override. There are 5 emergency bills on the agenda. One of them, medical cannabis clarification and program enforcement in emergency, is really just putting in place some of the provisions that were in the permanent bill that the permanent bill that was approved at the last meeting. And if I remember correctly, there's some repealers of existing law that really need to be repealed immediately. So that's the emergency being moved by Councilmember McDuffie. Councilmember Pinto has put on the agenda a bill called the Residential Tranquility Emergency Amendment Act, and that is to deal with these excessively noisy demonstrations that we're seeing in residential neighborhoods to try to regain some quiet in those residential neighborhoods. And I can speak more to that if there are questions. There will also be a motion by Councilmember Allen at the end of the meeting to override a mayoral veto of the DC Circulator Transition Emergency Amendment Act. I expect that will be approved since the bill went through the council unanimously. And the mayor's veto letter was a little confusing since, among other things, she attributed the whole issue to the council cutting the circulator. Now, it is true the council adopts the budget, but it's also true that the mayor proposed eliminating the circulator in the budget that she submitted to the council. The council ended up agreeing. So it's a little misleading, maybe even a lot misleading to suggest that this was a council initiative when more accurately it would be the mayor proposing and the council agreeing with regard to elimination of the circulator in fiscal year 2025, which is the year we're in. And this emergency bill that the council approved unanimously, which the mayor's overridden, simply deals with some transition issues like that the surplus equipment, including buses, would be, if sold, when sold, the money would go into a fund that would then help pay the circulator employees, all of whom are losing their jobs. I want to note that the council, the committee of the whole will be having a hearing on the mayor's monumental sports authority bill on November 14th. I believe it's scheduled for 10 a.m. The hearing notice has been published, so one can get that online. And the following day, the Committee of the Whole will be having a hearing on a bill that we just introduced concerning vacant property. That bill will not move this year, but we will have the hearing. And I mention it just because vacant property has been a concern to a lot of residents across the district. That's on the 15th of November. The 14th again is monumental, which I do expect the council will adopt before the end of the calendar year. I also want to note that because there's some legislation relating to the local rent supplement program, not that there's anything controversial about the legislation, but the council continues to disagree with the mayor and the Department of Human Services that we made a mistake in budgeting and that in fact we did not appropriate sufficient dollars for additional vouchers this year. When the council adopted the budget, we added when the mayor proposed the budget for the current year, she had $0 for new vouchers. And the council was able to find dollars for roughly 600 new vouchers. About a month ago, the Department of Human Services announced that the council goofed, and in fact, those dollars weren't available. A complete misreading of what the council did, since the council used various sources of funds, not DHS budget, for about 5/6 of the 600 vouchers that we appropriated. So we continue to disagree with the executive and do not understand why in this and other programs that DHS and even DHCD are claiming that the dollars are not there for programs related to housing. I do not have an update with regard to the work of the ad hoc committee. There is, the council retained a law firm to do an investigation. That I have not gotten a status report, but I expect that we will get that report in toward the end of November. The ad hoc committee has until December 16th for its recommendations, and to follow the council rules, that would mean that the council would act in January, assuming that there's a recommendation for either censure or expulsion. So that action would be by the council in January. And then I also want to note the sad news last week about Councilmember Vince Gray that he's going to no longer participate in voting in our meetings because of his health condition. And of course, all the council members extend their sympathies to Mr. Gray. And so I just wanted to acknowledge that. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. Yes, Megan.
With regard to the protest bill, various groups around DC have voiced significant First Amendment concerns with this legislation, and I wonder how you view that issue when it comes to whether this infringes on First Amendment rights.
As you know, First Amendment is not unlimited. There's a famous example is a person doesn't have the right to free speech to stand up in a crowded movie theater and yell fire. Well, similarly, we've had a law in the city for quite some time that limits, I'm going to say, protests in residential neighborhoods at nighttime hours. The bill that the Councilmember Pinto is proposing would amend that to extend the hours. As circulated last week, I do think that there are some changes necessary, and my understanding from Councilmember Pinto is that she is making some revisions to the bill. I'll say a little bit more. There have been several, at least two that I know of, residential locations in the city where recently there have been very, 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 very noisy protests. One of them is at the Chinese embassy in Kalorama, and I visited it last week at 7:30 in the morning. And using my iPhone, I measured the decibels at 128 at the source for one of the bullhorns, which, by the way, was not attended. The individual who had the bullhorn was across the street, where the decibel level was over 90. And over 90 is harmful to human health. 128 is like unbearable.
And I see the noise, sort of the intent of the noise restrictions in there, but it also prohibits the mere congregation of 3 people, perhaps on a public
Well, the
sidewalk. outside.
Residential Tranquility Act speaks to 3 people now, but doesn't prohibit a demonstration of 3 people or more. It's just with regard to this noise restriction. But as I said, I expect there'll be some revisions that will improve the bill. So I mean, there's a trade-off, and we know this in the district more than I think other cities, that we want to respect the right of folks to demonstrate, but there's a point at which, if the nature of the demonstration is primarily producing excessively loud noise, and 128 decibels is excessively loud, it's disturbing other people. So whatever the target of the demonstration, there are other people who are being adversely affected. So we have to find the right balance. Your right to protest and other residents' right to peace and quiet. Mr. Sherwood.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And also thank you for referring to the mayor's office and not the executive, so we know what we're talking about.
You're welcome.
On noise abatement issues, I know for many years the council has had to approach this and considered legislation, particularly downtown around the Gallery Place metro stop. Does this legislation deal with primarily residential neighborhoods? There are many people who live in the condos and I think some co-ops downtown who are also complaining about the amplified noises outside of their buildings. Are they covered by this legislation, the downtown
No.
urban
So
areas?
the emergency bill for tomorrow is amending the Residential Tranquility Act. And that speaks to, or the legislation tomorrow speaks exclusively to residential neighborhoods. So that would not
Zone
benefit the residents
residential, that could be
downtown.
apartments.
There's permanent legislation that, there are 2 bills that deal with the issue of noise more broadly and would benefit individuals downtown, living downtown, and also businesses downtown. The Amplified Noise Amendment Act, which is pending in Councilmember Nadeau's committee, and the Harmonious Living Amendment Act, which is pending in the committee of the whole. I expect both of those bills will move this council period, but that's not tomorrow. Tomorrow is exclusively residential neighborhoods and
Is that based on some
excessively loud
zoning?
noise.
How is a residential, just so I'm not clear what a
Yes, it's based
residential
on
neighborhood
zoning.
is. It's based on zoning. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Although let me be clear, it's not a zoning amendment, but residential neighborhood would be a neighborhood that's zoned residential. Yes.
Good morning, Chairman. Can you speak to the temporary legislation being voted on tomorrow with the pay equity fund? Is that kind of the final dotting the i's, crossing the t's for the salaries?
I'm not sure it's the final, because I think there may need to be permanent legislation, but it's the final with regard to the step we took a couple of weeks ago to adopt the recommendations of the task force. So we adopted emergency legislation effective for 90 days, and this would be the temporary version effective for 225 days after it completes congressional review.
For advocates who say that they're glad that the money was added back into the budget, but it's still not enough, what would be your response?
Well, folks are often saying that whatever we're appropriating is not enough. This is $70 million, which is, if I remember correctly, a little bit more than what was spent last year. But I'm confident that between the council and the advocates, we'll be revisiting the issue when we have the budget for fiscal year 26.
Afternoon, Council. Well, morning, Councilman. Can you elaborate on what the council's next steps will be in regards to the emergency bill with the DC circulator?
Assuming that the council overrides the veto, which I think they will, then it becomes law. And I'm trying to remember, I think, give me a second here. I'm looking, I don't see a temporary version of it. but that may be because the temporary was already approved.
Did you say that would be done tomorrow? The council plans to do that tomorrow, or was there?
It's on the agenda tomorrow, the veto override. The mayor vetoed it last week.
And then when would some of the orders within the bill be implemented for the employees?
If I remember correctly, well, I think there's several provisions in the bill, and I'm not familiar, so familiar that I can speak to all the provisions. That which is irked the mayor had to do with the sale of the surplus buses and any other equipment that she felt that, for reasons I don't fully understand, that it was inappropriate that the sale proceeds would be designated to a fund that would compensate the to-be unemployed drivers.
I know you mentioned that her veto letter was misleading. Can you elaborate on which aspects specifically within that letter were misleading?
Well, it is kind of galling to say, the council's, this is the first sentence, or the second sentence. The council's emergency bill seeks to create a new standard for contractor jobs that are eliminated as a result of council enacted budget reductions. What? Yes, technically, we enacted the budget reductions at the request of the mayor. She kind of left that part out. So as I said, it was a joint decision. And then she ends the letter by taking a swipe at our budget office. The council's fiscal impact statement does not properly account for the cost of redirecting revenue from the surplus property sales fund. I mean, she's just wrong. Our budget office does a better job with the budget and understanding the budget and appropriating dollars than any other office in the government. So it was an unnecessary swipe. And by the way, we in the district, our values are that we don't take swipes. Go
I'm
ahead.
not sure that might be a policy that's not necessarily followed. The question that Mr. Chairman, for some time now, you've stood there and other places and talked about the end of the mayor's lack of collegiality or working with the council members. You've just done it again today, that her administration is attacking the council for unfairly. To what extent can you say that, I know that you and the mayor are now trying to talk more frequently, but how much interaction is there between your staff and the mayor's people who are making these accusations against is it orchestrated by the mayor? Is it happenstance? It sounds like a government that's not functioning very well, the way you describe it and the way she sometimes describes it. I'm just, where are we? Are you guys like the Congress or something? You're not talking to each other? Or you're just disagreeing?
I'm going to avoid the comparison to Congress for a variety of reasons. I think that collaboration is, what's the expression? Collaboration is underappreciated.
Are you saying it's not a two-way street?
I am available anytime.
But are you saying
when
it's
I
not a
am
two-way
called,
street now?
This is my answer. And when I'm called, I will meet with the mayor, even if I have to rearrange my schedule. There are issues like with Monumental Sports where the mayor and I have worked closely together. And I think that we're seeing very good progress with regard to that issue.
I'm just
There
thinking,
are
Mr.
other
Chairman, the pot
issues-
shots that you take with each other, some of it's normal government, but to me, to the listener, to the citizen, to the voter, it's that, can't these people just get along some way other than on big ticket items where you're spending money?
Well, I think you're, among other issues, referring to my comments earlier about the housing vouchers. And I don't know what to say there. When we develop the budget, the mayor sends us a proposal, and she sent a proposal with 0 new vouchers. And I can criticize that, but that's a policy decision. We did not agree. We did not agree. The Committee on Housing, in its recommendations, made some rearrangements within the agencies under the Committee on Housing and came up with funding for about 100 vouchers.
Mr. Chairman,
Let me
I'm not
finish.
asking
No,
about
no,
the
let me
specifics of
finish.
the legislation.
No,
I
let
am
me
talking
finish.
about
Let
the
me finish.
tone
So
of
I'm going to
the,
finish. you want me to
Yeah,
or
but I
not.
just want to save you some
So,
time.
but then the committee of the whole, the full council, addressed the voucher situation by identifying an additional, I forget the millions of dollars, but came up with about 400 additional vouchers. And we did not take, the money for that did not come from the Department of Human Services, did not come from the Department of Housing and Community Development. It came from various sources, including increasing some taxes. So then when we are told in August, late August, early September, that the council misunderstood, misappropriated, misidentified, basically screwed up. That seems to me to be a personal attack on the council. It's not a, well, we don't agree. It is, well, the council screwed up.
Did that
And yeah,
come as
I
a
feel some
surprise? That's what I'm
resentment over
asking
that.
about the tone of this.
I
But-
feel resentment over that. You
Right,
can-
but
I'm
that's a-
giving you my answer.
Yeah, yeah.
I feel resentment
Yeah,
over
but the
that. So of
citizens
course
don't
I'm going to sit
understand the
here and
ins
say
and outs
that.
of the legislation. I'm asking a larger question about all of this review. I perfectly understand if you think that the mayor's office is not working with you and making false accusations about what
Yes.
the council's. I
Yes.
understand that. I'm
Yes.
trying to get to the point. Why is that? Is that because there's too little communications between the two of you?
Well, I think you have to ask them because when and
Oh,
I
you
left
oughta
this
kn-
part out, but when we developed the budget, we also worked closely with the different agencies. We asked DHS for their funding assumptions behind the vouchers. We asked the CFO for their funding assumptions regarding the vouchers. We asked DHCD for their
So
funding.
you are working with the various agencies to put the budget, to
Yes.
explain the budget. Okay, I
Yes.
got that part.
No, to be able to,
To ex-
I mean, to certify the budget, that we know that the budget's balanced.
So what
we
is the
work with those
source of them accusing the council of not
We
knowing
have to
what
ask the
do?
mayor.
Well,
It wasn't my attack. I didn't call the council stupid or that we screwed up.
but it seems like on a more of a personal level rather than a professional level that these things are occurring.
Maybe it's personal if I resent the council being accused of screwing up on the budget.
Is it, okay, why do you think the executive office of the
I
mayor
don't
is?
know, and I don't know what's going on.
Have
with
you
regard
asked
to
the mayor,
council.
why are your people putting out phony, fake stuff against the council? We should be working together.
I
What's
have
our
had that
answer?
kind of conversation in the past. It's not a pretty
Okay, well,
conversation.
okay, thank you. Thank you.
But you have to ask them why they would accuse the council of screwing up. So I've seen that on a number of programs in DHS as well as DHCD. I think you have to ask them and ask them as well, why is it that they feel this need to reverse council appropriations? When I say council, it is the council that ends up adopting the appropriations bill. You have to ask the executive why it is that one day they say that it's balanced and the next day they say we goofed. And that is, well, yes, Dorothy.
I'd like to ask a question about next week's election, if it'd be appropriate.
Everybody should vote.
The question I have is, I have three questions for you, if you don't mind. First, last week, the council and the mayor had a breakfast meeting in which the principal subject was Christopher Rodriguez's presentation on preparations in the District of Columbia for the election. At that meeting, I don't recall you making any comment or raising any concerns. What is your personal view and assessment of the district's ability to conduct the elections next week?
I'm not in doubt that the results will be tabulated accurately.
Is that all you want to say about the?
What else do you want me to say?
Okay, let me go on then. Are you aware of any issues or problems at the Board of Elections that could adversely impact the ability of the Board of Elections to conduct the elections next week?
I am not aware. Now, I don't have direct oversight over the board. The Committee on Executive Administration and Labor has direct oversight. I'm not aware of the concerns that you are implying.
Are you aware of issues that have been brought to your attention in emails to your office regarding problems at the Board of Elections?
I'm aware of some allegations like issues about whether the conditions at the warehouse are fair. How do I put this? are decent or appropriate for employees there, for example.
If I could clarify what you just said. For more than a year, there's been a situation wherein the Board of Elections has two warehouses in the 3500 block of G Street that should be condemned. At one time, they had no working toilets, they had no potable water, and right now, they can't even plug in the election equipment because of the electricity in the building. The city administrator interceded and got them additional space over on the Half Street building where the Board of Elections is aware of. All of that information in detail has been provided to your office. Have you acted on any of it?
Have I acted on it?
Yes.
No,
Have you spoken to the city administrator about the situation?
no.
Why?
I don't have oversight over the agency. The Committee on Executive Administration and Labor does.
But Mr. Chairman, you might not have oversight over the Board of Elections, but you're the chairman of the council.
Yes,
So you don't think you have any duty or obligation or responsibility to assure that the elections next week are properly conducted? And so then you remain silent?
are you asking me a question or?
Yes,
you
I'm
arguing
asking
with
you a
me?
question.
Okay, do I think that I have no responsibility? No, I didn't say that, but I don't have oversight, so I'm not following, I am not the best committee to understand what's going on and to have the relationships and to follow up with oversight.
Can I ask
That's
one
essentially
last
what you're
question? Have
talking
you
about.
ever visited the offices or the facilities of the Board of Election and seen firsthand the horrific conditions, the warehouse especially, the two warehouses are in?
I've not been to either warehouse.
Elections.
Yes,
Trying to be orderly here today. Last week at that breakfast that the Dorothy referenced, I think the council, you and I think Mr. Allen asked for a weekly briefing on preparations for potential violence and
Yes.
troubles. The mayor was asked if she
3
thought
times.
businesses should board up. Is there another meeting, I think, scheduled this week for the council to get a briefing on what's being prepared for next week's election?
I believe that that will be part of tomorrow morning's administrative meeting.
From city officials, not the
Yes.
mayor herself.
I'm assuming city officials.
Do you have any concerns about it? The mayor was asked directly, do you think businesses ought to board themselves up for election day and potentially even for January 6th or January 20th, but just for election day? Do you have a feel
I'll
for
give
that?
you
She didn't give an
my-
answer.
My candid answer is this. We always have to find the right balance between leadership and alarming folks. So I think at this point, it's premature to talk about businesses boarding up in January. Let's get closer to that and understand what the situation looks like. And then if
Excuse me,
it's
what about
appropriate.
election
to-
day next Tuesday, a week from tomorrow?
Yes. What about election?
Boarding
day?
up.
I don't think so. Now, I mean, what I would want is a briefing from emergency public safety officials that there are some threats, which I'm unaware of. Let me be clear. I'm unaware of there being any threats or potential for property damage. And so it would be unnecessary, alarmist and unnecessary to say that businesses should board up either next Tuesday or in January. I mean, so I remember not well, because I've tried to forget this, back in January of 2021, when I did get some briefings and there was quite a bit of monitoring of social media and I think trying even to get to the dark web and see what kind of threats there were and whether it was the usual low level of noise or something more significant. If it's something more significant, then I would expect that the council members would be informed, and then at that point, it would be appropriate to inform the public.
If I can
Yeah.
circle back quickly to the pay equity fund, are you expecting that legislation to pass tomorrow?
Yes.
And if you can talk about with that in mind, the importance of passing it to make sure that that pay scale is in effect before the payments are divvied out.
Well, I believe the first payment for this year, this fiscal year, is the end of December or early January. So it's important that we have this in place. And what this is about is a more appropriate pay for early child educators. Some people think of them as childcare workers, but in fact, they are educators because that is really what goes on if you have a good childcare facility. And that originally where this came from was the notion that childcare workers should be, childcare educators should be paid the same as their peers in DCPS. Although we are talking about childcare facilities, it would be pre-3K, that is 3-year-olds, earlier than 3-year-olds. I mean, this is part of the education system. And so the pay should be decent. I was at an event 2 weeks ago that was not a DC government event. It was not a DC focused organization. It's a national organization that works in this space across the country. And the district is lauded as being a leader and the envy of educators across the country because we recognize the importance of early child education.
I had a follow-up to the DC circulator. In the mayor's veto letter, she mentioned that council did not properly account for cost as it relates to the bill. Do you have an estimated number of what cost would be needed to fulfill everything within the bill?
I do not. You could talk with our budget office and ask them the basis or, you know, the background to their fiscal impact analysis. But I'm, as I said before, I'm very confident in the work of our budget office. Yes, Maggie.
As well, going back to the mayor's veto letter, she suggested that this was special treatment for contractors that other government workers would not receive. Can you respond to this sentiment? That why are these contractors receiving this assistance versus any other types of workers? And secondly, I'm just curious if you know the proportion of them that are DC residents.
I do not know the portion that are DC residents. I know the mayor said that in her veto letter, said that the majority of them are not. I don't know. You'd have to ask the committee. Councilmember Allen brought this to the council, and Councilmember Allen chairs our transportation committee, and Councilmember Allen has been working with issues related to public transportation like WMATA and the circulator. And so he has the expertise and the knowledge. That's what I was trying to convey earlier with regard to oversight that these committees develop the expertise and knowledge. He felt that there was that the transition was happening more abruptly than had originally been expected or announced, and that there were inadequate steps taken to help the employees who are faced with early job loss. And so this was his recommendation, and the council agreed.
Staying on track with vetoes and overrides, the self-certification legislation dealing with LRSP vouchers. I'm just interested in, you know, this debate happened around ERAP just a few weeks ago on self-certification, and the council and mayor ended up agreeing to dial that back. But in this case, these are different. This is a different type of assistance, of course, but I'm wondering how you think about self-certification in this area of housing assistance versus ERAP, where there was a decision that we should discontinue that, whereas here these are being made permanent.
Sure. So I'll start with this. Self-certification is a tricky subject. I think we have to look at the specific program and also and with regard to the specific program, the why there would be a need for self-certification and what the consequences are if self-certification is allowed. So, and I say it that way because I have to remember here with ERAP, the self-certification is to participate in the program, to be eligible for rental assistance. This would be individuals who have apartments and therefore have stability in their lives, and therefore are likely, highly likely, to have identification documents. And so we said, because they are highly likely to have identification documents, that self-certification does not appear to be as necessary. That was the policy choice we made. With regard to the local rent supplement program or vouchers, that is an application for eligibility to get a voucher. It is not an application for the housing itself. So there are two steps. And so that speaks to what I said a minute ago about consequences. And with regard to who would be applying for the vouchers, for that particular program, it is overwhelmingly going to be homeless people who don't have housing stability by definition, and therefore there's going to be a higher incidence of individuals who have difficulty getting identification documents. It should not be the goal of any of our programs that when somebody needs the service, that they should have to wait half a year, 2 years. And for some in the homeless population, for instance, somebody who might be from out of state, having lived out of state but now being in the district, it could take over a year. And I said 2 years because I somehow remember that there are some instances where it could be a couple of years, but I may not be remembering that correctly. Let's just say over a year to get identification documents. This is the person who needs assistance now. But being eligible, being determined through self-certification to be eligible for a voucher doesn't mean that in turn, this, I'm going to say, and then using the thinking of the critics, that this unknown person now suddenly gets an apartment. There's another step which does not involve the government. That was a long, complicated answer, but the point is that these programs are different. Let's look at the issue of self-certification with regard to the particular program. And as I said before, the circumstances of the individual and whether there is a greater or less necessity for allowing self-certification.
Follow up on this voucher disagreement, kind of going back a bit to what Tom was talking about, where when there is a disagreement, it just kind of seems, I hate to say this, but to like fester rather than be resolved. Have you met with officials in the Bowser administration or between the two budget offices to try to, if there's still this misunderstanding of what happened, what's being done to kind of work on this together to understand what happened? It seems like there's still a bit of mystery around the budgeting issue that they're talking about, versus, we're talking about millions of dollars that were set aside in the budget, and now the Bowser administration is saying they cannot be used for that purpose. And I just wonder what actual action is being done between the council and the mayor's office or DHS.
I
to
have not
understand
met with the executive with regard to that issue. I would say that's what ought to happen is that with regard to the vouchers, that the DHS or DHCD, both of them should be coming in and meeting with the housing committee and having the discussion, which they've not done. With the,
Like, are you guys seeking that discussion or?
well, we're not the ones who said the council screwed up. We're kind of put on the defensive here. I think that they have if they question something, they have a duty to come to us and try to figure it out before they criticize us for screwing up. On the voucher issue, in the self-certification, that has its own dynamic. There was a hearing on the legislation a year ago. No, let me go back. We first adopted that as an emergency, I think during the COVID or right after the pandemic. And the mayor sent a letter expressing concern saying she wanted to work with the committee. And then she never did. So she volunteered to work with the committee and then didn't follow up. There was a hearing. subsequent to that. And at the hearing, the mayor declined to submit testimony. Typically, she would do that to to one of her agencies. DHCD did testify at the hearing, but on a different bill, said nothing about the voucher. So then when she came back and vetoed that legislation, that was a year ago, it was a complete surprise and, in my view, an unwarranted action, since she had volunteered to work with the committee and didn't, and had an opportunity to submit comments and didn't. And in fact, the Housing Authority, which is independent, did submit comments and didn't raise any of the concerns that the mayor did in her veto letter. I'm not quite sure what to do with that. And I've seen this on other issues where there will be a final action like a veto that it just is not supported by any of the executive branch's actions prior thereto. I mean, that's just, I find that it hard to work with somebody when, you know, if I ask you, give you an opportunity to give me comments, you don't give me comments. And then I adopt legislation. And the first time I think she signed the bill, the second time she sent it back unsigned. For you to then just veto the legislation, I would say that you're the one who's not being, working with us or being collaborative. So I'll repeat what I said before, which is, because I think the concern behind these questions is quite legitimate. The government works better when the branches are working together. And I am always available. Mr. Rice.
Chairman, you were quite specific in your stand against Initiative 83 at Meet Up with Mento recently. As I understand it, you, Anita Bonds, the mayor, the Democratic Party, I believe Robert White, and the AFL-CIO, Metropolitan AFL-CIO are all against it. Have I missed anybody else who is?
I don't know. You're correct about me. I do not support the initiative, but I have not kept tabs on who all has.
Any
come out against
council
it.
members? Can you tell us any other, do you know the position of any of the other council
I
members?
think there are more than who you identified who oppose it, but those were in
Care to
private
suggest
conversations.
who they are?
No.
And why do you oppose it?
First of all, I think the Democratic Party has a right to having a primary that is limited to Democratic registered Democrats. And if somebody is not a registered Democrat, they could become a registered Democrat if they want to participate in the Democratic primary. With regard to the ranked choice voting, I think that is a solution in search of a problem. I think the problem that individuals identify is that they don't like the folks who are in office. I think that is a misunderstanding of the democratic process, of democracy in this country, and that the solution isn't going to get better office holders. So let me elaborate on this. I haven't really spoken about this publicly before, so I might ramble a little. I think the technical term is weave. I've come to realize that our form of democracy, which is a representative democracy, is intended to have ordinary people who are in the legislative branch, the people's branch, ordinary people. And ordinary people include some really smart people, some really dumb people, and a whole lot of other people in between. And I think as well that when we get down to the business of specific issues, that, I mean, this has been said over and over again, that nobody's going to agree with an elected official all of the time. And so people come to, over time, find reasons why they don't like an office holder. That's just what representative democracy is about. So then there are folks out there who are trying to find a solution to come up with the perfect office holder. It's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen because our government is about electing ordinary people to be in office. So ranked choice voting is the latest proposal for coming up for the perfect office holder. The office holder who is Well, the argument is elected by a majority of folks. The last time I checked, I've been in every general election been elected by a majority of the voters. But then they look at the primary, but that's not the election that elects me. I go to election night parties, and the person who got elected for the first time, everybody's so excited. This is a new and different person. They're really going to be great. Really excited about this person. 4 years later, they're just like anybody else in office. They've got their pluses and their minuses. But ranked choice voting is going to come up with somebody different? No. But it is going to be a more complicated ballot. It's going to confuse people. I have heard mixed reviews about problems with ranked choice voting, that there's some jurisdictions that have repealed it. I haven't really researched it, so I don't know, but I've heard that the ballots are longer, that there are some, how do I want to put it, drawbacks that we've seen in election performance. I don't know the extent of that, but I do think that it's not a solution, because I'm not sure what we're solving for other than to come up with the better office holder, and we're not. And that's spoken from not well practiced on my part, thought about the principles behind our former government.
Mr. Chairman, I want to ask you about the arena decision, but very quickly on the I-83. You've said in the past, I believe, that you would not overturn initiatives that are passed by the
I
people.
have never said that.
No, with some other initiative,
The last initiative, which
the
was for
council
the tipped workers,
right?
I said that I would not
On that one,
support a
okay.
repeal, yes,
All right,
even though
thank-
I think that the
Okay.
implementation has been very, 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 very harmful to restaurant workers. I hear nothing but complaints from restaurant workers who are getting less pay and a really confusing experience with regard to tipping.
On Initiative 83, the initiative, I believe, says it will be, if it passes, will be in effect for the 2026 election. Is that correct?
I'll take your word for it.
I think that is is there any chance that the council may decide that the implementation of ranked choice voting is so complicated that you need more than a 18-month, 2-year period, and would delay the effect of this initiative until 2028?
I have assiduously avoided speculating what happens after the election.
Okay. Very quickly on Councilmember Ward, Councilmember Trayon White, this past week, he jettisoned his private attorneys and got the district court, to approve for him public defender status. Does that in any way affect what the council is doing with its administrative review of his actions?
I don't think it does. I think because people may not have heard the question, I don't think that the action with regard to changing attorneys affects what the council is doing.
If I could ask you about the arena announcement that the mayor and Ed Leonsis made last week. You've been an integral part of this backroom discussion to get this to where we are.
I don't know that I would call it backroom, but.
Well, I'm sorry, meetings with the parties involved. That's a nicer way of saying it.
The negotiations for the last 6 months or so
Even
have
longer,
been,
but yeah,
to get the details to the term sheet that was announced back in March.
Right. The term sheet was announced, the initial term sheet was announced 7 months ago, back in March. And now it's just the new version submitted to the council was just done last week. What are you doing to speed up the count? You said you want all this to be approved by the end of the year. It appears you're speeding up the process in terms of announcement and what needs to be done. Are you speeding it up? Some would say you're short-circuiting one of the most important decisions that the citizens will have seen made about the development of downtown, hundreds of millions of dollars, and you're rushing to get it done by the end of the year. Why does it need to be done by the end of the year?
Well, I'm going to disagree with the premise. We are trying very hard to follow regular order. So first of all, in terms of the public awareness and public's right to know, what's before the council right now is essentially what was announced back in March and is consistent with what we adopted in the budget in June. So I would not say that we're short-circuiting. In addition, our rules require that in order to pass a bill, which this is, we have to have a public hearing, which we will. And our rules require that to have a public hearing, there has to be a notice of the public hearing that's published at least 15 days beforehand in the DC Register, which we are complying with. I didn't read the Register last Friday, but the notice should have been in the Register last Friday for a hearing on November 14th. We're required to vote twice on bills, which we will do. We will either vote on November 26th and December 3rd, or on December 3rd and December 17th. We will have the two votes. So we're following regular order. We're not waiving the rules with regard to any of those processes related to public participation.
One of the normal rules is, one of the normal processes is that as chairman, you assign legislation to committees. In this, right?
Yeah, and this was.
In this case, you've taken the arena project into yourself as chairman of the committee of the whole.
Which is consistent with how we've handled other sports legislation.
And you've only comments are going to come from the Economic Development Committee headed
Sure.
by Kenyon McDuffie.
Sure.
Is that, will there also be a committee of the whole committee report before there's any vote?
Yes. There will be a committee report. There will be regular order. I believe the Nationals ballpark bill followed the same referral process.
Will there also be a tax abatement financial analysis?
Yes, there will be.
And do you have a financial statement from Mr. Leonsis himself that his company is financially able to do this project?
I'm not concerned about that. That's the first I'm hearing that question.
When the NFL takes an owner for a team, they require extensive financial disclosure of the person asserting that they have the money to buy a team. I just wondered if the city has ever looked at all. I'm not suggesting there is or isn't a problem. I'm just wondering if that would be part of the deal to see the financial wherewithal of this, of the private company this district is basing its downtown revival on. And I recognize those might be confidential financial documents, and I'm not suggesting in any way Monumental can't do it, but I'm just trying to, this process having gone on so long in the background is now being thrust in front of the citizens, and it's going to be done. It took 7 months to get to this point. It's going to take less than 7 weeks to get it approved.
Yeah, you threw out a couple of things there. Let's see. Well, as I said, I think the legislation is consistent with the term sheet that was negotiated and announced on March 27th, I believe. So that's more than 7 weeks. And I think the bill was introduced like Friday a week ago. So I think that works out to a little bit more than 7 weeks. Thank you for that insinuation. But it's following regular order. As I said, regular order, there will be a hearing. There's the 2 weeks in the register. It's actually more than 2 weeks. And there will be the 2 readings and
Two votes.
there'll be the 2 votes. So it's regular order. It's not being rushed through.
I don't mean to insinuate anything. I'm just looking at the calendar and the process. It seems to be speeded up.
It is moving consistent with our rules. It's not taking its time. It doesn't have a leisurely course or leisurely path. It's moving consistent with the rules.
So you have not waived any, you're using the council rules. I understand that. I'm not suggesting you're not following your rules, but have you used the rules to speed up this process? Have you waived any actions that you might normally?
No, nothing has been waived, but in the interest of full disclosure, there is tomorrow an amendment with regard to the tax abatement financial analysis that instead of it being required before the hearing, it has to be required before the final vote.
And why? That's my list of things of here. That's one of them, is that a significant tax analysis.
Well,
is
I
not
think
gonna-
I know what the tax analysis is going to say.
Well,
That sounds
that's-
shocking. I think I know
That's
what it's
like
going to say.
the member of Congress saying, we know who's going to vote in North
Well, it's
Carolina.
going to
let's see
say
if we
one
can
of
get
two
the
things,
votes to.
Tom. It's going to either say that without this legislation, the renovations can't occur, or it will say only because of this legislation will the renovations occur. And my guess is that the conclusion will be that it does not meet the but-for test. That's my guess. But we kind
Well,
of knew
well,
that,
guessing is not, I'm not sure guessing, well, I guess that's all right. I guess it's all right that you can guess. I'm just-
not only that, but I'm guessing that you would agree with that. And, but we've known since last December when we put the offer out. for
Not
fi-
sure how much information is in the public domain of what's being done by the council so quickly.
Well, the entire lease and the related documents are on the council's website, which is, I believe, hundreds of pages.
It's hundreds of pages.
Yes,
Is
that's
it-
all out there in the public domain. I don't know if, well, there probably are some other documents, but I don't know what they are. In terms, but what's before the council is, among other things, the lease extension. That may be the main thing. I think that, what do they call it? The disposition and financing agreement, the DFA, that's before the council. Those documents
And
are
the
all,
alley closing and all those the other things. On this one thing, you and the mayor, as you said earlier, you and the mayor have worked together on
Correct.
this. You had some disagreements last year, but you basically worked together on this despite
Correct.
your personal and professional disagreements on how that you should work together. This is, how would you rank this arena thing as the biggest, is it not the biggest project for the revival of downtown Washington compared to all the other things that are being done with how commercial to housing and other street changes? Is there anything bigger than this?
as a single project, I suspect it is, I'm going to, without having done a detailed analysis, I would say yes, as a single project, this is the biggest thing. It's $500 million, which is what we approved in the budget. And other initiatives that we've taken that may be more important would not be a single initiative like the some of the tax abatements as a matter of policy that we've put into law for downtown conversions to stimulate. They may be bigger in terms of long-term consequence, but not as a single project. This is, I think you're right, the biggest single project.
Given that you expressed your dismay with the mayor's administration in not being forthcoming or accusing the council of not doing this or that,
Why you keep going back to
are
that.
you, well, you spent some time on it earlier. Are you
I'll show you
confident?
pictures of me and the mayor together.
Are you confident that the mayor's administration is giving you all the information about this deal that the council needs?
I have not thought to the contrary. I just does not, I have not thought to the contrary. I think that what we need is what we've got.
Okay, thank you very much.
I think you've exhausted us. If there are no other questions, thank you all very much. See you tomorrow morning at 11 o'clock.